But how are you gonna get there if it's like 300 miles away?
Alright, let's do it one last time. His name is Peter Parker. He was bitten by a radioactive spider, and for many years, he was the one and only Spider-Man. He saved a bunch of people, fell in love, saved the city, and then along came a Spider-Man named Miles Morales, and there were a few things he could do that Peter could not. There's only one ScreenRant and you're looking at it. He's in comic books, he did a Christmas album, he has an excellent theme song, but Peter Parker does not have it all. In fact, the relatively new Spider-Man, Miles Morales, may have the upper hand when you start to go deep. Besides his powers, there are things in his life and effects in real life that our OG webhead will never be able to do, so let's rapid fire break down what Miles has over classic Spidey. Sure, Peter Parker is the webhead we all know and love, and he absolutely boasts an impressive range of powers and abilities. However, even old Pete, with all that he's seen, couldn't help but be blown away when he first saw, or more accurately, stopped seeing Miles. The camouflage that Miles exhibits may at first seem to be out of left field when compared to Peter's ability to just do, whatever a spider can, but scientists have documented rare color-changing white-banded crab spiders with the ability to blend into their surroundings just like Miles. Yes, folks, there will be a little science in today's show, so do what Spideys do and stick around, because that's not going to be the only time science will play a part in this universe. Now back to our scheduled nerd speak. The ability to camouflage is a huge upside for Miles to get the upper web on baddies, or just take a much needed breather once in a while. Imagine how frustrating it would be for Miles to have to take on classic Spidey villains like the Chameleon. Actually, I guess in that instance it would mean that we'd be staring at an empty room, but inside we know it was awesome. This episode is in no way sponsored by Duolingo, but Miles makes a great spoke spider because he's dual languaged, or I guess you'd call it bilingual. Look, while we at ScreenRant are still getting the hang of this language, Miles Morales is out there with a fluent use of Spanish. Likely his mother Rio's Puerto Rican influence is a big part of why Miles has the advantage over Peter, not just in Spanish Harlem, but really anywhere, since over 41 million people in the US speak Spanish in the home. A little diversity can go a long way. From Earth 1610 to our world, can we sidetrack for a minute? It's a fact that there have been no less than 7 Spider-Man films with Peter Parker as our main protagonist. That's an impressive number of fun movies compared to the one featuring Miles as the lead. However, not trying to steal the count from Sesame Street's bit, but Miles has one Oscar. Chris Miller and Phil Lord won Best Animated Feature for Into the Spider-Verse, so with Peter going 0-7 thus far, perhaps Miles is the one that should be doing a little Spidey street dance. That's not to say that Pete would be jealous of the new kid in town. In fact, Peter has helped Miles at every turn, from building Miles his own web shooters to teaching the noob how to web sling. The fact that Peter is this willing to be a mentor for Miles is another thing that Peter never had coming up, and a huge advantage for Miles' growth as a hero overall. It's a testament to the willingness to help everyone he can that we never really see Peter get jelly as the new Pepsi of Spider-Man swings onto his turf. It might make a more insecure hero's skin crawl, but he'd rather teach Miles to wall crawl. While we're on the topic of heroes and their turf, let's not forget that Peter and Miles actually trolled different areas of New York City, with Peter hailing from Queens and Miles living in Brooklyn. This actually puts him in the same borough of another Avenger, famously mentioned in Captain America: Civil War. Look, Peter has always had a healing factor that's brought him back from numerous beatdowns he's been handed over the years. Has that suit ever not had a rip by the end? However, when it comes to Miles, his ability to regenerate is more accelerated, and he's able to withstand certain attacks better, like poison and electrical attacks. It's hard to shock any young teen, as a parent will tell you. However, when it comes to Miles Morales, he may have taken it to the next level. Miles has a power that grants him bioelectric kinesis. This allows him to channel electric energy from his body through his hands and into an unwilling recipient, and is lovingly called his Venom Blast. This Venom Blast is strong enough to separate a symbiote from its host like, well, Venom, actually. He can control the level of the blast to just stun lesser villains or completely incapacitate whole groups with an electric blast. He even uses it as an EMP to knock out weapons or tech altogether. If we want to take those electric powers even further, Miles has also been found to extend this power beyond just his hands. He's shown to be able to send electrical currents through webs and even create threads out of pure energy, something Peter has not been able to master as of yet. Again, science fans, there is precedent for this in nature, as the glue that makes spiderweb sticky is electrostatic and attracted to any charged particle that it comes across. Electrical currents can be used as a warning to potential prey, and scientists have even considered using spiderwebs in place of environmental sensors to investigate pollution levels without the need for electronic sensors. See, I told you the science was coming back. More to come, spider nerds. Hey, don't judge. We think these things being represented in creative ways to heighten Miles in the comics is cool. Just like Miles himself seems to have a bit more of a circle of friends than Peter. Peter always tended to be the loner picked on in high school, while Miles seems overall to be different, but more accepted in the halls of Brooklyn Vision's Academy. While Peter kept his focus on his family, crushes, and on his book learning, Miles juggled those relationships along with his best friend, different roommates, and is frequently seen interacting with his classmates. With both Spideys being able to use their spider sense to avoid trouble, it would seem this is one place where Peter and Miles can call it a wash. Let's be honest, we'd all love to have the ability to avoid an incoming food fight or flying projectile. Peter is pretty zen with his sense after all of his experience, which is a plus, and Miles initially seemed to have a weaker signal, but like 4G to 5G, turns out it's just a little different. In the comics, we find out that Miles' sense is a little faster and more extreme in his head, and at times is able to detect threats outside of his close proximity. With a little more experience under his belt and many more panels to be written, we have a feeling that this could expand even more with time. It keeps seeming like the ways Miles has a slight upper web shooter are endless, but the thing is, we still got a lot more. Just consider for a second how many times in Miles' short run as the all-new, all-different Spider-Man that he's been able to throw off old Peter Parker villains just by being the new kid. After years of dealing with Earth 616 Peter, they've gotten used to his web-slinging ways and have spent endless hours adapting to what he can and cannot do. Every time they meet 1610 Miles, being younger, smaller, and with different powers, they don't know how to react to the news that there's a new webhead, and are often fooled into thinking that they can use the same moves on Miles, and boy are they in for a shock. His noobness takes on a new level though in Secret Wars, when just because he's a hungry teen, he's able to save the universe by sharing a hamburger with Molecule Man with Peter Parker looking on in awe. Peter has always known to be cunning and able to think on his feet. His adaptability has gotten him far, but Miles takes this to another level too. He likes to take the time to study his enemies, usually from their past encounters with Peter, and use that to his advantage. When he went up against Norman Osborn in Ultimate Spider-Man number 6, Miles put these skills to use. He was able to learn his fighting style and created moves to counter it. He told Norman prior to battle that he had done this and he still got the upper hand. That cocky teen attitude will get him far, methinks. Did we mention Spider-Man now has a cat? In the new PS5 game, we now have Spider-Cat. And as a cat person, we just think that Miles being a pet person should count for something, right? Nothing says attitude like the threads you wear though, and we think we have to just take a minute here to talk about the costumes. No doubt, throughout the years, Peter has gone through a whole assortment of upgrades on looks, and in the MCU, he's definitely up to some of his tech. In the games, you can pick from dozens of great Parker-specific suits from years gone by, but let's be real here. Can you pull off Jordans with any of them? Miles' suit is unique and stands out as one of the coolest Spider-Man suits there is in black and red. He is still privy to a lot of upgrades from both Peter and S.H.I.E.L.D., and the introduced graffiti spider logo is perfect for the little Spidey that could. Spidey likes to keep up on trends, which is why we often see him incorporating his life into his job as a hero. Not only does he sport backpacks, headphones, and hoodies, but like most teens, he always keeps his music a part of what he does. So much so that the soundtrack to Into the Spider-Verse earned 3 Grammy nominations. And who doesn't think about Miles when listening to Post Malone's Sunshine? You don't need to know all the words to be a music appreciator. Though Peter Parker had a lot of partnerships with the Avengers and other superpowered people, he never actually lived with any of them. Miles keeps his pals close while going to school. In the 616 universe, Fabio Medina, an X-Men who gained his powers after the AVX storyline, moved in with Miles and Genki and went by the superhero name Goldballs. Okay, I see you snickering, but hey, that's his thing. He concentrates and is able to create and shoot balls made of gold, and has taken on the likes of the Sentinels and Dormammu. While we are now used to seeing our MCU Peter Parker have a guy in the chair with the Ned Leeds character playing a major role, he is clearly an adaptation of Genki from the Miles universe. Peter has usually had MJ who has had his back and filled that role, but Miles started with his non-powered best buddy who always has his back. Genki is a fun-loving Korean-American buddy who actually was able to determine that Miles got his powers not through a dormant X gene, but by the genetic tampering in the comics. Albert Einstein once said that the greatest scientists are artists as well. While Miles is yet to best Peter in the science department, art is one spot the mini mighty Miles really shines. From the moment we see him doodling in the opening of Into the Spider-Verse, to his affinity for tagging and graffiti, Morales has always had an eye for the creative and doesn't shy away from those passions. The youth factor as well cannot be overlooked, as the younger webhead clearly has so much more superheroing to go. While Pete is in no means in the phoning it in phase, he has been portrayed as the guy who isn't surprised by anything anymore. With all those years and history behind him, his villains aren't very likely to underestimate him as opposed to a 14-year-old kid. The same way Peter used this to his advantage in the early days, Miles can use this to his advantage now. The one thing we can never get more of is time, which brings me to my next point. Miles was bitten by a spider with a formula developed by Norman Osborn to try and cure diseases. When Stormin' Norman shows up to a battle with the Spider People, he dropped that little immortality nugget in for a taste. He stated that the only side effect they could track was immortality, but was more than a little cuckoo at this point, so you never know what to believe with these Osborns. Goblins these days, huh? Am I right? It sets the stage for the death and rebirth of Miles, which isn't exactly unheard of in the pages of comic books. Miles' family comes with a different perspective that no doubt affects his outlook. While we do find out that Peter Parker's parents were in the CIA at some point, Peter never got the time to absorb their direct teachings. Miles, on the other hand, grew up with both of his parents, with his dad being a decorated police officer and mom being a nurse. Having a member of law enforcement and a frontline worker in the family, Miles understands the meaning of service. It's no surprise that S.H.I.E.L.D. attempts to recruit Miles' dad, Jefferson Davis. Miles Morales is not burdened with the need to come up with a funny quip all the time. Trust me, ScreenRant subscribers, we know that pressure. Peter always has a line up his sleeve for the baddies. While Peter uses humor to get through most problems, Miles is not afraid to be serious. His sincere, soulful demeanor leads to some insightful and really heartfelt moments from this Spidey. Both Spider-Men have a bit of both, but when push comes to shove, Miles is not afraid to take things seriously. It goes without saying that Miles Morales is a game changer in his own right. Spider-Man has always been about giving voice to normal kids who see themselves in him. Miles Morales allows for a whole new set of stories to be told with a new perspective. He reinvigorates everything Spider-Man and makes not just himself, but Peter Parker fresh for years to come. It gives hope that anyone can wear the mask. This theme is constant in the film Into the Spider-Verse, which tells the story well, but is also based off of the original idea from Stan Lee. He loved Steve Ditko's full body costume design because he thought it was also inherently relatable. What Miles also brings to the table is the reinforcement of the idea that anyone from any background can take up the mantle of their favorite superhero. Miles represents a whole new generation of underrepresented youth in comics. Being of mixed descent with both Black and Puerto Rican ancestry, he gives hope and inspiration to scores of new kids just like him. To face adversity, give beyond yourself, act in service of others, and not forget to just be a good kid while doing it. Miles Morales didn't get to be the next Spider-Man. He has always been the essence of everything that is Spider-Man, long before he pulled on the tights. So to conclude, His name is Miles Morales. He was bitten by a radioactive spider. He had some skills Peter didn't, and we think you know the rest. Subscribe and stay tuned for more. See ya.